In Johnson City, Tennessee, a scandal is unfolding that's shaking the very foundations of trust in law enforcement. It's a story of corruption, betrayal, and systemic failure. At its center is Sean Williams, a local businessman accused of being a serial rapist. Shockingly, Williams was allegedly enabled by the very police officers sworn to protect the public. Now, a federal corruption probe into the Johnson City Police Department raises the haunting question: how could this happen? This is not a case of negligence, it's an indictment of a culture of corruption where power and privilege took precedence over justice. Williams, well-connected and wealthy, stands accused of sexually assaulting over 50 women. Many of these survivors reported their assaults to the police, expecting justice. But the lawsuits now filed claim that instead of investigating, the police shielded Williams, some officers allegedly taking kickbacks in exchange for their silence. Williams' reign of terror was only exposed after an unrelated arrest in North Carolina. It was not Johnson City's officers who brought his crimes to light, but out-of-town campus police. They uncovered damning evidence, photos and videos of Williams sexually assaulting unconscious women and even children. How could Johnson City's police have missed this? The answer, according to accusations, is simple. They didn't. They allegedly chose to look away. The federal probe now threatens to expose the full extent of the department's betrayal. The allegations go beyond ignoring crimes. They point to a deliberate cover-up. Lawsuits reveal a pattern of suppression, threats, and harassment targeting survivors who refuse to stay silent. In one shocking instance, former JCPD Captain Kevin Peters is accused of hiring private investigators to intimidate victims at their homes and workplaces. The alleged intent? To scare these women into silence and prevent them from pursuing justice. This is not just about a few corrupt officers. The claims suggest a deep, systemic failure involving high-ranking officials. It's a story of power misused, of a police force that, instead of upholding the law, allowed a man to continue committing heinous acts against women with impunity. As if the police cover-up wasn't enough, Johnson City's leaders have further compounded the damage. City manager Kathy Ball publicly insinuated that the women bore some responsibility for their assaults, pointing to their use of illegal drugs. This victim-blaming narrative shifts attention away from the police's failings, painting the survivors as partially culpable for the crimes committed against them. It's a tone-deaf response that deflects from the core issue, the failure of Johnson City's police department to protect its most vulnerable citizens. The survivors of Sean Williams did everything right. They came forward, they sought justice, yet they were betrayed, not only by their attacker, but by the very institutions sworn to protect them. Kathy Ball's comments reveal a broader institutional unwillingness to confront the extent of the police department's corruption, instead placing blame on the victims. This scandal is a stark reminder of what happens when power goes unchecked, when the connections and privileges of the powerful are protected over the rights of the vulnerable. It is an example of the kind of systemic failure that fosters public distrust in law enforcement and fuels calls for police reform across the country. So, how did this happen? It happened because a system meant to protect the public was twisted to serve the powerful. It happened because those entrusted with upholding the law used their power for personal gain. This case is not about a few bad cops. It's about a culture that allowed a serial predator to operate without consequence. It's a damning reflection of a system that abandoned justice for the sake of personal and professional interests. Now, a reckoning looms. The federal investigation into the Johnson City Police Department is underway. Similar investigations in other cities have led to criminal prosecutions and even federal oversight. The hope for Johnson City is that this probe will finally reveal the full extent of the corruption within the department and hold those responsible accountable. But no investigation can undo the trauma these women have endured. The damage is already done, both to the survivors and to the community's trust in its police force. Johnson City's police department failed its citizens, and the impact of that failure will be felt for years to come. As the investigation continues, one thing remains clear. Johnson City deserves better. The people of this community deserve a police force that serves and protects, not one that shields predators and silences victims. The hope now is that justice will be served, not just for the survivors of Sean Williams, but for everyone who believes in the rule of law and the promise of justice for all. To stay updated on the latest breaking news, subscribe to Breaking Through News on the Newsbreak app or on our website at breakingthrough.com.